So today I am here with Craig Randall, and we are on the Question Guy podcast, and we're going to talk about his new book. It's called Trust-Based Observations. And so I've got the book right here for all those who are watching it, for those who are listening on Spotify or Anchor, you know where to get the book. And so I wanted to start here, if that's okay, Craig, that there's a lot of praise for the book from senior educators and people that you know, but one of them really rang true, at least to my heart. And so I kind of wanted to read it to kind of get us started with the conversation. And so I'm just going to read it verbatim from the book, if that's okay.
Great.
Okay. It says, trust-based observations is an overdue rethink of how to support the most important asset in schools and in the lives of students, their teachers. And so I can't agree more with that. This book honors the art and science of teaching and the complexity of creating learning environments where all students can find success and challenge. And this was written by Glenn Whitman, who I think is a colleague or a friend of yours. And he's the director, both?
I don't know.
Okay. Good man. Director of the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning. And he's the author of Neuroteach, Brain Science and the Future of Education. So I think that along with all the other kudos for the book really speaks volumes about what's going on here. So before we even kind of get into the conversation, what is teaching and what is good teaching? So let's really clarify those two things. They may sound simple, but they may not be simple in practice.
You're exactly right. And I think I'm going to start by saying what some of my issues with the way the teachers are being evaluated are right now, because I think we've narrowed what teaching is, or what the expectations of teaching are when we evaluate teachers. And I think it's almost as if, like listen, Danielson and Marzano are the two primary models that are out there. We know that. And there's all these indicators of good teaching. And if you were to look at each one of the indicators on all of them, I would say absolutely. If you're at the meets expectations, or whatever word you want to use that they all use for it, or above, I would say absolutely, that's fantastic. And I wouldn't argue with any one of them. But when it's become now where we're supposed to go in as observers, and we're supposed to mark you on a 1 to 4 level from not acceptable to exceeds on these, and you have to have all of them in my teaching, when maybe I see you once or twice a year to get these in. One, you're not seeing authentic teaching, because I'm, as a teacher, creating what you want to see so I can pass and be retained. And then two, teaching is just so much more complicated like that. It's not just a tick box exercise. So when we think about teaching, it is art and craft. I'll tell you, and this maybe is too good teaching in a way. We were doing a training in the UK, and there was a teacher there, and she's an experienced teacher, and she was probably in her mid 40s. And so those of us that are that age or older, which I'm older, we're not as tech savvy as some of the younger people are. And she had a new software program. It was like an architectural software program with these elementary kids. And she'd done her homework on it, done all the things on the next day, but she wasn't expert in it. And of course, what happened? There's a glitch. There's 5 of us in there during the training. So we're all observing her, and it's not working the way she wanted to. You can imagine what she's thinking. She's thinking, oh my gosh, this is happening right now while I'm being observed by 5 people while there's this training going on.
Right.
But that's what her head's thinking. What she's doing is she's doing masterful teaching. When something's not working, she's thinking off the top of her head in the moment, what am I going to do? She has a student that's an expert and already knows the program. She taps into that kid, has that kid teach the other kids, and everything goes along smoothly. So kids end up teaching other kids, which is the highest form of retention of learning, right? And so she thinks it's been horrible. And we tell her, no, it's amazing. And yet when we have these tick box exercises of what teaching is, that would actually be discounted because she wouldn't have been prepared necessarily. So like teaching is so complicated. It's not just a tick box exercise, because in the moment with each kid, with each developing human being that's a brain, and we don't know what they're bringing from home that day, the baggage from whatever might have happened at home. And we in the moment have to deal with that no matter how well planned we are. It's an incredibly complicated exercise. to be successful. And the other thing I'm going to say is there are a million different ways to be successful. You could be an old school lecturer, and I've seen them that are so charismatic and they blend in other elements that make it a little bit less traditional, and they're amazing, as well as somebody that you would consider the most progressive teacher in the world. And so that's like I'm saying maybe more what good teaching isn't, or what the limits are, but it's so much, it's hard to describe it, which is maybe why I talked around a whole bunch and didn't necessarily answer your question.
Well, then from your perspective, kind of just from your heart, what is good teaching? What would it look like from your heart?
Care, first and foremost. I have to care for my kids. I have to believe in every one of my kids, and I have to be relentless in what I'm doing, and nothing will stop me from trying to help each and every kid succeed. Obviously, I have to work hard. I have to be prepared. I have to have content knowledge. I have to have an understanding of what good pedagogy is. And I don't want to go into all the different areas of pedagogy, but I have to constantly be assessing what's going on the fly, making adjustments. Even though I have a plan, be willing to differentiate and adjust my plan according to that. I have to find engagement. I have to tap into the kids' interests, like if I'm going to get them to learn. So those are some elements of what good teaching are, for sure. You can't, we'd be here for 3 days, I think, if we came up with a fully exhaustive list of what good teaching is. But those are some key elements to me.
So when you wrote this book, it didn't just happen overnight. What was your thinking process? What was the process of developing a, a trust-based observation tool? And quite frankly, why did you develop it? That's kind of really the important thing.
Yeah, well, one, I didn't know I was developing it. I didn't know any of that. I know I had my master's program with my principal certification. My mentor, the man, it's a dear friend and my mentor. I didn't know he was my mentor. In his class, we had to bring in these mini lessons every day, 10-minute mini lessons. We'd practice and we would have reflective conversations that are the same two questions that we start with now. What were you doing to help students learn? And if you had it to do over again, what, if anything, might you do differently? So because we practiced that so much, I was super confident in my ability to do observations in a different way than the traditional way, and I didn't like the traditional way. I got really lucky with my first principal when I was an assistant principal, and I said, hey, I have this weird way I want to do observations. And he was at a point in his career where having somebody young and enthusiastic excited him, and he said, okay, let's do it, and he did it with me. And then I'll say this, instantly I saw teachers responded so dramatically differently to what we did by highlighting strengths and just asking those questions as opposed to telling them. And then really, I didn't ask questions at first. I didn't offer suggestions at first, a little bit because I was afraid, and a little bit because I was new and wanted to be liked. And a little bit because I thought, what if I offer you a suggestion and it's something you're really good at? I just hadn't seen it yet. And then about the third time through, going through all these teachers, because we would see them a whole bunch, like 12 a week, a bunch of them started saying, okay, but what can I get better at? And I didn't know until a long time later. But what I realized later was that was trust. And so because we'd done this other way and made it about them, asked them about practice, got them to reflect on their practice and shared strengths, they trusted. So they were way more willing to take risks. And then really it wasn't until the last international school I was at in Brazil, where the head of school said, will you teach the other principals what we're doing? And then about 3 months later, the elementary principal said, Craig, you've got something really good here. You need to protect your work. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, no, this stuff, it's not like other stuff. And I thought, oh, wow. So I thought, wow, I'll present at a conference. That went really well. Then I thought, oh, I'll write an article. And then we ended up coming home. We had some money saved up, and I thought, oh, I guess I'll write a book. So it wasn't purposeful. I'd love to tell you I planned it all. I certainly researched once I started working on it to find evidence that what I was doing works more than what's out there. But I'm not smart enough to purposefully create what happened. It was an accident.
Well, sometimes we digging for gold in one place and we find it in another, and you just happen to find it somewhere else, and that's perfectly fine.
And it just developed, and all these
Yeah.
circumstances along the way helped us develop into what it is. And that's part of it, just kismet. I don't know.
But what you do have is gold, and so I do want to talk about it. So the questions that you just asked come out of chapter 8. And so primarily the two questions that you just asked are, what were you doing to help students learn? And I think that's a really good primary question.
Yep.
And number two is, if you had to do something over again, what, if anything, would that be? And how would you do it differently? So can you reflect and I'm using that word specifically, can you reflect on the power of those two questions and how they really foster conversation with the teacher?
Absolutely. I'll just start out by saying it's such a transformatively different method of starting an observation, because that's how we start it. Because in traditional models, it starts with me telling you everything and giving your rating. So instead of that, and in our model, I sit beside you and the form is right here so you can see everything that's going on. So we're being transparent. And I'm saying, I care what you think instead of my just telling you what I think. And I'm going to care so much that I'm going to write down your answer. Like that to a teacher is golden. The reaction every time we do a training, when we just start asking questions, it sends a message that reflection is an expected part of practice, but it also sends a message that this is a collegial dialogue here about practice. Mm-hmm. And so it's just that. It's like it's about you, not about me. And that means so much more to teachers.
Well, then let's go into the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is a reflective conversation. And like I said, I use that word purposeful. You used it purposefully in your book. And just kind of as a backstory, at the time of this recording, my most recent conversations with other educators, and this is really across the globe at this point, is a talk on metacognition as really kind of a foundation. It's being missed, basically. Metacognition, the ability to reflect and to teach others how to reflect upon themselves, is really just being missed in the education arena.
Yeah.
But you're doing it and your book talks about it. Can you talk about the reflective conversation a little bit?
Absolutely. It's where we always say it's where the magic happens. And it's all about trust though. And every single thing that we do with it is designed to build trust. And I'm sure you know Brene Brown, because who in the United States doesn't know Brene Brown, but she talks a lot about vulnerability, and vulnerability can be a good thing, but we have to lower vulnerability enough so people are willing to work beyond the uncomfortable feelings to be willing to take a risk. So if we can create a condition where you're willing to take a risk, and then we add the metacognition piece where you're thinking about practice, then that's what happens. So Brene Brown talks about trust as like a jar, and putting marbles in the jar, and it takes a whole bunch of marbles to get trust. And so we start by saying, one, we have it in the teacher's classroom instead of in our room, the reflective conversation, instead of in our office. And we always say, whether you're 7, 17, or 37, getting called to the principal's office feels like getting called to the principal's office. So they're safer in their own space. They feel safer. Two, when we go to the room, we ask permission. Hey, is now a good time? It seems like a silly little thing, but that's a marble in the jar. No one ever says no, by the way, because they all want to know and how it went, even though we don't rate you. And then we sit beside you instead of across from you. Hierarchical power differential psychology says, if I have more power than you and I sit across from you, that magnifies it. When I sit beside you, that minimizes it. So I sit beside you. And as the father of 20-year-old twins, who during those teenage years didn't always want to talk to me, but we'd go on a hike or in the car, all of a sudden they would talk to me. We don't think it's that much different. So then, like we started to say already, instead of my telling you things, I ask you. And the form, just like we're showing right here on the screen, would be right in front of you. And so we're transparent. Here it is. I listen to what you say as you ask. I type out your answers. I might reframe it. I'll make sure I captured everything. We unpack even that second question about what, if anything, might you do differently, because we say, because sometimes teachers will feel like, oh, the part after we left was the best part, or the part before we got there was the best part. And so we say, share that. If that's what you feel like sharing, that builds trust. That's more marbles in the jar. We say, if anything, because sometimes, and I've seen this hundreds of times during a 20-minute observations where I wouldn't change a thing. It's perfect. And we always say, when that happens, celebrate it. Tell us that. Don't feel like you have to come up with something because I'm your boss. So that's a marble in the jar too. So we start just by doing that. And then I'll tell you, this is the next thing we do, and it's not in the book, and I don't know why it's not in the book, but
there's version 2.
I'm hoping. Well, now there's so much experiential, anecdotal stories from doing trainings. I hope there is.
Oh yeah.
But we tell the teachers, listen, I want to talk to you about the ultimate goal of trust-based observations. And that is for me and every other person in this building who does observations to build a trusting enough relationship with you and every other teacher in the building so that any one of us can walk into your classroom, we can observe you, we can see you trying something new, have it be a complete and total disaster, a train wreck. Yet when when we leave after those 20 minutes, you don't have a worry in the world because you already know we built enough trust that you know what's going to happen the next day. And that is when I come into your room, I'm going to say, I love it. You were taking a risk, high five, fist bump, or whatever. And so when we do that, we've had trainings where we tell that to teachers every time in a training. I've had teachers get teary-eyed with joy just hearing that, because that's so transformatively different than the way the experience is now. And then we just go through the 9 areas of pedagogy. Research says anything more than 10, we lose the forest through the trees and start ticking boxes and not see the craft and art of teaching. And the form is super specific, and it looks daunting at first, but it's actually not that difficult to do, especially when you're trained. And it's so powerful when you share specifically with the teachers what's going on. An interesting thing is when teachers will tell us after we do a round of trust-based observations, we'll always say, now you've had a round, whether you want to talk about it in comparison to other models or not is up to you, but we'd love to hear what you think. Something that teachers will say really pretty regularly is they'll say, before, when I had a good observation, the principal would say, oh, that was great. Your relationships with the kids are amazing. Your management was superb. It was super engaging. The kids were all on task. Keep it up. And they'd say they really, really appreciated that. Now, though, because of the specificity of our form, we might say, so under formative assessment, it was a teacher-led formative assessment. It was clearly planned for, and really it was a combination of observations, conversations, and artifacts of learning as you were circulating the room after the kids got started on their project. And teachers over and over and over, there were no value words in when I said that, and I'm all about throwing in positive value words, but just saying that, teachers will say that means so much more to them because it's so concrete and so specific. But the other part is, because it's so specific, it gets them thinking more about their practice in a purposeful way. So under formative assessment, like we've got peer-to-peer formative assessment or selfless formative assessment. So now they might start thinking, because we praise them specifically with what they did without a rating, oh, maybe I ought to start thinking about adding some of these others to it. So it helps them to build their practice too. And the other thing, actually, I'll just have to say that the form does, that teachers will say afterwards, because they're peering in and looking at it as we're going on to it. And they'll say at the end, when we ask that question, they'll say, you know, I'm actually starting to think about what to do on my own without you even saying anything, just by sharing those things. And so just by transforming it like that, and I'll just tell you, we don't offer suggestions at first. The first 3 visits, because of that first experience, we're all about just showing that we trust you. But I want to add one more piece to the reflective conversation bit here, is that when we talk to teachers, and we're going to offer a suggestion, we only at the 4th visit would be the earliest. I would never do every teacher in the 4th visit, because that would overwhelm me with the amount of work that would be. But it's about supported suggestions. And so, one, I don't tell you what to get better at. We ask permission again, and we say, hey, I've got a suggestion. Would you like to hear? And sometimes when I do a training, or when I'm talking to someone about a Zoom that's thinking about a training, I'll say that we ask permission, and I'll see leaders kind of like, what? You ask permission? You don't just tell them. And what I say is, it's just a slight semantic difference, but it gives them the opportunity to buy in versus being strategically compliant when I tell them to do something. And it makes a big difference in the way they engage with that. And the other things that I tell people is, I only had one person ever say no. And as I like to joke, but it's true, she was French. So who knows? But on a more realistic level, we don't know what baggage she has. We don't know what kind of a traumatic observation evaluation experience she had, because there are lots of people out there that are principals that aren't very good ones and can be quite mean. But 2 or 3 months later, I brought it up again and she was ready. But we ask permission, but then it's supported. It's not, hey, I want you to get better at formative assessment, Keith. It's like, hey, I have a thought on formative assessment, you know, once they've said yes. But I've done my homework ahead of time, because I'm in classes so much, because we're seeing all our teachers firsthand. I know who's best at what in my building. So I could go and say, hey, Keith, I know you're really good at formative assessment. I've got a teacher that could really benefit from your help. Would you be willing to help them? Everyone always says yes after you say that, because you've just genuinely praised their skill in an area. So we either do that, or on the form, we have toolbox possibilities, which are hyperlinked, which is a professional development resource for each of the 9 areas of pedagogy. So I might do my homework and say, wow, these 2 articles with these 2 little strategies, we could go over those together, and then the teacher could begin to implement that tomorrow. So that would be the second way that I would maybe help the teacher. Or the third way might be, I don't have what I need in building, so I'll find a conference or a class for them to go to. And then, because I'm seeing you now every 3 to 4 weeks, as opposed to once or twice a year or 3 times a year, next time when I see you, I do the observation the same way, but I know what I talked to you about improving on. So I've got an extra eye towards that. So perhaps then maybe I can get the instructional leader coach kind of model to help you a little bit with that. And it's continuing. It's not like now we're going to work on something else. And we only do one thing at a time, because the research shows if we spread ourselves too thin, we don't really get better at anything. And that's the reflective conversation in a really fast nutshell, and how it makes a difference.
So what I have to say is that there are not enough praises for the book. If you could talk a mile a minute and really get your message across, I'm going to praise you right now, because that was perfect and that was awesome. And it was a real question, because I write all my questions down, because
There we go.
that's what the question guy does. He writes all of his questions down just so he doesn't slip up. How can people get in touch with you, and where can they find your book?
You can get the book on Amazon. And really Amazon in just about any country has it, and that does Amazon. And
so this is multilingual. This is, you said
no, but it's sold in English, like even Amazon Japan has it. Amazon Mexico, they have it in the English version, and Amazon Australia and Canada and UK, they still have it. And there's bookstores too, but anyway. So the website is trustbased.com, TRUSTBASED.
I'll make sure it's in the description. Okay.
Thanks, trustbased.com. And so you can go there and you can look all kinds of things up. And then my email is craig@trustbased.com. And I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, all that stuff. So those are how you can get a hold of me.
So give the teachers who are watching this something to look forward to, a gold nugget, something. If they're going to pick up this book, what would they want? What would you want to give them right away?
It's going to change the culture of your building. I'm going to share a little story of how impactful it is with teachers.
Please.
When we go to a building, the school leaders will say, well, how much should we tell them ahead of time? Are they getting trained too? And I say, no, they're not getting trained too. They just participate. But we just say, look, just tell them you're going to do this new style of observation. It's called trust-based observations. We think you're going to love it. There will be a big group of us coming in during the training. It's going to be okay. And really, we just leave it at that. What ends up happening is I always say teachers are big gossips, but this works to our advantage this way, because after the first couple, it happens every week exactly the same. It's crazy that it happens the same every week, but it does. The first couple teachers that start having it, they start talking about it, and all the teachers are there. And then you'll hear the school leaders by Wednesday saying, my gosh, there's just a buzz in the building, and it changes your culture like within a week. And this is maybe the best thing that I can tell a teacher about how they might feel excited about it. The last school I was at was an international school in Cambodia. The school leader and I were walking out on Friday afternoon, and just as we were walking out, at 3 different times, we happened to come across teachers we had not seen that week. And all 3 of them said a version of exactly the same thing, and they had the same wistful tone. They said something along the lines of, oh, I thought you were going to observe me. And it's like, where do you get that, where people are saying, no fair, I didn't get my turn, about teacher observation? And that's like just 1 week of doing a training, how quickly it changes the mindset for teachers and how much teachers look forward to the process. So that's really, I think, the best thing that I could share.
Well, that's awesome. I thank you so much. And of course, thank you again for being on the Question Guy podcast. And if you really want to do a chapter by chapter or point by point conversation, I could put it on in my playlist, and you could have it for you, because this is a big book. There's lots of value in here.
Thanks, Keith.
And for every administrator out there across the world who actually has the burden and responsibility of creating really good teachers, because what we want to do is raise up really good kids.
School
We could
leaders
have
love
this
it too.
conversation.
It's transformative for school leaders. They actually look forward to doing observations as opposed to now. So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that, Keith.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks.